Have you ever wondered what therapists really talk about when they're off the clock? Are you looking to embrace open discussions about mental health while also laughing and relating to real content? Well, if so, you found the right place. Welcome to Unfiltered Therapists, a Kindred Roots Therapy Inc. podcast where the world of therapy meets candid conversations. Our podcast is tailor made for those who are ready to navigate life's challenges with humor, authenticity, and a dash of therapy wisdom. Our mission is very clear here to make therapy accessible and inviting. We want you to feel like you're part of our circle, relating to our discussions and finding nuggets of insight that resonate directly with you. Whether it's conquering anxiety, embracing self acceptance, discovering the latest therapeutic approaches, or just wanting to listen to other people bitch about their moms, we've got you covered. Join us as we kick back, shoot the shit, because believe it or not, us therapists do that too, and explore the depths of mental health, the human experience, and the overall road to wellness. We'll be here to answer your questions, discuss the topics you're most curious about, and create an atmosphere that feels like sitting on a cozy couch, chatting with your friends. If you're ready to laugh, not in agreement, and feel like you're part of a supportive community, hit the subscribe button and get ready for unfiltered conversations. This is Unfiltered Therapists, and we're about to break barriers, embrace growth, and invite you to join in this journey of true, authentic self-discovery. Let's do this. Hey, hi, Zach.
Hey, Allegra.
Thank you so much for joining us today. I think that this is by a long shot going to be probably the most popular podcast episode ever. I came across your content just naturally maybe a month ago and was struck by just how relevant it was in the most simple of ways. So I'm going to give you what I perceive to be probably the worst intro for what you actually are. And then I'm going to leave it to you to do the rest. Is that okay?
Sure, go for it.
Okay, sounds good. So, Zach, you term or coin yourself as being a recovering man-child.
That's right.
And you are a content creator who is most definitely going viral online, sharing personal and generic examples of how partners fail at sharing the domestic, mental, and emotional load. From what I just saw today, you have 240,000 followers on Instagram and just under 300,000 followers on TikTok. And you clearly are hitting a sore spot on the public forum. So tell us more about you. What is going on here?
Sure. So I think I would start with a little over a year ago, two other content creators I really look up to, Abby E and Laura Danger, introduced me to the Fair Playbook. Read through that, started looking to sort of implement the Fair Play method at home. I'd already had a decent following on TikTok that saw me as a guy that did things a little different than most. The first attention I was getting was while I was on paternity leave for 3 months. I didn't know that was rare. So I was talking about these things thinking it was normal, and people were like, what? So, I had a pretty large female audience. And at some point, I started talking about mental and what I was learning from Fair Play. And I didn't realize how few people had the language to describe mental load within their relationships and their families. So with my teaching background and my engineering background, I know that the way I learn math and the way I learn algorithms and language is practice examples. So I think it was last December, I made my first couple of videos like, here's an example of where I added mental load for my wife today. And that was the first time I was like, wow. I think when I saw the first comment of like, why am I crying right now? I was like, wow, people feel a lot of women and moms are feeling really heard right now that this is their lived experience and have little to no language to describe what they're going through. Even though it sounds like this is consistently a known part of culture, it sounds like there's a lot of guys out there that are really invalidating that experience. And so that's what I've started doing is I realized how valuable that was for a lot of people. I love those DMs coming in. My favorite DM to come in is a guy saying, "Thank you so much for making the videos you do. This has been really game changing in terms of the conversations I've been able to have with my wife. I so much better understand what she's been going through for years. And we're doing a lot better than we were 6 months since we started watching your stuff." So
Wow.
those are like my favorite messages to read. I don't get as many of those as I would love. I probably get like one every week or two. But most of them are women saying, "Hey, love your content. This has been helping create better conversations. Can you do this example for me?"
Oh, okay. I was
Yeah.
gonna ask, where you get the inspiration, and I know that sometimes you will share just like, oh my gosh, this morning, this is what I've noticed.
Yeah.
And I think that one of the most potent parts of your content is that it's not these like large overarching questions, because there are a lot of partners out there that are actually phenomenal, but we have a hard time articulating where the ball's being dropped because the large things are amazing. It's the little things that
Mhm.
you can't put into words. And I think a lot of your content just like, it's like, oh, yes, thank you. Like, I feel so seen because now I'm understanding why it holds so much weight. So, to that, can you explain to the best of your ability what is the mental load? What is emotional load, domestic load? What is it?
Sure. And I think sadly the best way to explain it is through examples. So I think it's
I love examples.
the thing that you think about while you're mindlessly doing dishes. It's the thing that keeps you up an extra 45 minutes to 4 hours when you put your head on the pillow and you can't stop thinking. I think mental load is typically the things that if we look at all the ideas and the responsibilities we have in our life as balloons that we're just trying to play keepy uppy with via Bluey, that it's all those balloons that you don't see, and the only time you see them is when they touch the ground or they pop, or it
Mm.
turns into an argument around resentment. But even then, you might see what came out of the balloon. Maybe there was glitter and now you have a glitter storm on the floor, but you don't necessarily know that it came from a balloon that they had been. I've never used that
Mm.
metaphor, but I think I might stick with that one for a while.
I like it. That's a
Yeah.
good one. I like the idea that you don't know that you're doing keepy uppy with a balloon until it hits the ground and pops, where it's all of the little things that are like, you know, I want to give you an example of actually something that your content taught me in my own house the other day. So I was deeply burnt out. I say was. We are all there. We're going to have so many conversations on this podcast about this eventually. And just came home and was so tired and was sitting at the counter and trying to finish answering emails. And my husband came down and was just like, "Hey, I think we should order dinner. What do you want to get?" And I was so angry. I was like, "Why are you asking me this?"
And I would love to pop in here. This is so for people listening, this is like the coaching that I give, one, to my clients, and two, like, this is a perfect like content creation idea, is the coaching I would give to that guy that's like, "Hey, why did my wife flip out at me for asking what we want for dinner?" So again, as a math teacher, one of the things I got good at or you have to get good at, is writing tests. Um,
Mm,
you're you'll see where this connects in a minute. And so for anyone that's taken the SATs or taken any high school class, you have those tests that are like 40 multiple choice questions or 10 open response questions. Which one would you rather have? And even further, so what if those multiple choice questions, if you didn't know the answer, it came default answered the letter C? So you could actually just pass in a test that's already pre-filled out and it's all the letter C. What he came to you with was an open response.
mm,
But if he had come to you and said, "Hey, I think both of us are emotionally drained. I know you just came back from a weekend. I want to order out, and I'm going to give you a multiple choice test with a pre-circled answer. I'm thinking I'm a big fan of pizza right now, although I know you've had pizza a couple of days. Second option is Olive Garden. I know we don't get unlimited breadsticks, but we get a good amount of them. Or we could just go sideways comparatively to the two Italian ones, and maybe I'm thinking sushi. We can live it up a little bit. I vote sushi. Do you have any input on that?" And so what they've just done is they gave you multiple choice answer. They showed the work that they were doing and what they were thinking. And then they gave you the option to opt in or opt out of decision making by choosing for you if you did nothing.
Yes, because it's so funny. Originally, when you were just explaining this to the multiple choice, I was trying to take myself back to that moment. And I was like, he said to me, we could order pizza. I could make something. I could order this, but that's going to be more expensive. But like, this will be easier, but whatever. And I just was like so emotionally checked out at this point. But if it had been, I'm leaning towards X, do you have anything opposing to this thought? I would have been like, no, great, sounds great. And again, it's not that it's being put on me. It's like, this is the reason I reached this decision so that I don't feel the need to question that. And I can just agree without feeling like I'm playing a guessing game of like, so you just gave me 3 options. My gut tells me you already have decided which of those 3 options you want. And now I have to play a guessing game and hope that your response aligns to like relieve this conversation and not keep it going. And I think that sometimes in any partnership, we like want to leave space to hear our partner's opinion without our opinion getting in the way of that. But it leaves a lot of room for guessing or mind reading, which is not usually going to result in a very happy conversation at the end of the day.
And
Yes.
I will say, I know that sometimes Alyssa will come and say, hey, I think I really want takeout, or I really want, I want to eat out tonight. And then I'll give her options. Okay, we could go Papa Gino's, we could go Domino's, like our 2 go-tos. We try sushi or something. And I feel like it's a trope that I see a lot, like in comedy on TikTok and Instagram, is like, no, I don't want any of those. Okay, what do you want? And then it's like the Notebook. What do you want? And so similarly, it's like when we think we're being easy and outgoing, and I'll go with the flow. Like that sounds really nice. However, it's putting the decision fatigue onto the person that is choosing. And I made a video about this not long ago because I was talking with one of my clients about this. Is a lot of us have bought into that phrase that I don't know who told it to us. I think everyone's heard it, is happy wife, happy life. And it sounds great at the beginning. However, there's 2 underlying pieces that I think really fuck with us. Can I swear on here?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. The first one is that when you say happy wife, happy life, what does that mean for an unhappy wife? Does that mean it's an unhappy life? And it's like this underlying feeling that, okay, if your wife is unhappy, like she's gonna fuck your day up, like you're not gonna be happy people. So it's like this, I guess you could say a trope or a stereotype that like an unhappy wife or mother is like a monster. And so I think we need to get rid of that first, is like, no one should be demonized to be a monster if they're not happy. I think that should be a much more okay place to be. And I'm a big fan of like a lot of those relatable mom videos that aren't necessarily comedy, but just like calling out life for it is what it is, and we don't have to sugarcoat it.
Yes.
Like Libby Ward, I think does a great job of it. Let's see, Diaries of an Honest Mom. Where was I going with this? I lost my train of thought. Shit. The second
happy
piece,
wife, happy life mentality. Yeah.
So the second piece to it is, if we're saying happy wife, we're saying, yeah, babe, I'll do whatever you want to do. And so at first, in the beginning of the relationship, when things are rosy colored, it's really easy. And it's like, oh, he's giving me options. He's letting me choose. That's awesome. And then when we go down the road of the wedding, I think was a really great point for us, is you can start seeing where, okay, I'll give them anything they want, but they have to choose what they want. And that's a shitload of choices. And so like for our marriage for a long time, for years, so we're married for 8 years now. I was really proud whenever I hear people talking about like, oh, like we have our wedding coming up, and I'm like, who's organizing it? Who's doing? I just poke and curious. And I remember for a long time I was proud saying like, Yeah, I chose bow ties, the color purple, and cupcakes. And that was my piece. And I was like proud of the fact that I inputted those things and those are my ideas. And it was not 100%, maybe 97%, but not 100% my wife's doing. And this past year, as I've been realizing what level of problem, maybe not problem that caused, but the precedent that it created for our relationship, and that she was going to be the designer of our lives and I was going to play along and have a couple preferences, is actually not great.
Hmm. That's such an interesting observation, because I do fully see that, how like the happy wife, happy life mentality of like, if I just give my wife the opportunity to have whatever she wants, then she'll be happy and I'll be happy. But we want a partner. We want someone who has opinions and voices those opinions and is welcome to hearing our opinions and working together. Like, that's a partnership. And one of the things that I heard recently was that marriage is supposed to be empowering, not enduring.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like this is such a sentiment to this exact idea, where it's like, oh, my enduring love is that I will feel slight pockets of minimal resentment for a second when I just give in to what it is that you're saying you want, because that's what I'm supposed to do. But what's empowering is to feel like you are safe to have an opinion, share your opinion, work through an opinion with someone, and both come out of it feeling like, as a partnership, we reached this decision together. I'm so curious, Zach, at what point in your life, I know that you mentioned reading the book Fair Play, but like, at what point were you developing a self-awareness of this and wanting to work on this?
A handful of people have asked me similar but not the same questions of like, how do you think you came to be the way that you are, and how do I, and the unspoken question is, how do I get my husband there too?
Yes, I see that question come up for you a lot online, so let's hear it.
I think there's a couple different factors. So I'm going to answer my question first, and then I'll move into yours. So first, I think I was raised with a feminist mom, bra burning 70s hippie. She calls herself a humanist, but let's be real, mom, you're a feminist.
Yeah.
And then I think that was like the first part, which, you know, you can't necessarily recreate that for boys these days necessarily. So that was like just a part of my community, was my mom having that impact on me. Second part, I think, was, so I met my wife at the Landmark Forum, which, you know, I met your trainer, Aimee, there too. The reason that that's important is because we had a really good foundation of communication in those courses. She had already done some of them. She was doing them again with her siblings that were doing it for the first time. When we went into the leadership course, she was a coach in it versus I was a first-time participant. So my listening for her was that she was a leader and that we could use these new communication tools together. So I think we've consistently held ourselves to a pretty high level of expectation for how we show up, because we found each other in a high level communication course. So when you meet someone there, like you're practicing those, like literally day in, day out, you're practicing using those skills. I think I would highly recommend anyone check out Landmark Forum. We did the curriculum for living. I don't know if they still call it that. Landmark Forum advanced course and self-expression leadership program. I got more value out of that than 4 years of college as an engineer.
Wow.
Yeah. So I'll say that that's a strong recommendation I have for people. The third one, and again, to give you a little context of what my mom was like, she asked me when we found out we were pregnant, she said, Zach, are you planning on being pregnant with her? And in my head, I knew exactly what that means. Most people, what the hell does that mean? What that meant is like, are you going to be, I didn't have the language for it yet then, but are you going to do the emotional labor to be alongside her when she's going through her challenges? What that looks like is not drinking with her. If she is cutting back on coffee and weaning off it, going down to tea, are you going to do that with her? Are you going to go with her to all of her appointments? Are you going to help schedule things? Are you going to help build out the nursery? Are you going to show up to the baby shower? are you going to help plan the baby shower? Because that one's tough, because I know it's more of the mother-in-law on both sides help out with that one, but I think you get the idea.
Oh, yeah.
So, and without a doubt, I was just like, yeah, of course. Why are you even asking me, Mom? That's a stupid question.
Yeah.
So I think living in that, I guess, culture that my parents built definitely helped. And then even that did not teach me the mental load, however. So I think when I was on paternity leave, so one, I would say being sober with her during her pregnancy, there were, and I talked about this on Aimee and Ellie's podcast, was like, I recognized that it was a lot more for me actually than it was for her. There's definitely an ego piece that I wanted to look good in front of people. Look at me, I'm being sober with my wife, which took me a couple months to realize I was doing that. The second piece, though, was realizing, so for example, I had a bachelor party that was scheduled when she was, I think, 4 or 5 months pregnant. And I was like, okay, do I just pause my being pregnant with her to drink my face off for the weekend, or do I stick with it? And so I decided to stick with it. I wore a fanny pack with a 5-pound weight in it to remind myself if I had any. See, and that's the ego piece. So your face right now, like you, like being excited about that. Like, I know that my ego is so massaged from seeing women's faces like that. So don't gas me up too much. But
wait, but can we pause for a second and just talk
sure.
about how part of this growth is acknowledging that that's an ego stroke for you, and how even though I can recognize that this should not be so groundbreaking, I can also give you the accolades that you deserve for confronting something that is groundbreaking, while you can also recognize that that's an ego stroke and not the core reason why you are doing this in the first place. Like, those things can exist at the same time, but it's the acknowledgement of them existing at the same time that makes them non-problematic. So thank you actually for turning around and saying it that way.
I don't know why I'm tearing up right now, but thank you for that acknowledgement. I appreciate that. The really cool thing that happened that weekend, I kept waiting all weekend for someone to say this, was like, dude, it's not your problem. It's not your, she's pregnant. Like, that's her job to not drink. It's not yours. Someone did say something close to it. And I said, yeah, I just really disagree with you. And we left it at that. They didn't want to get into it because they knew I felt pretty, I felt a strong amount of conviction on that topic.
Yeah.
But what was pretty cool, so like, there was a beer Olympics was the weekend. And for those unfamiliar, you play drinking games all weekend to have a championship. And I had a designated drinker throughout the weekend. So like all weekend, like I'd be like, nope, I need someone in here drinking for me. Like, I also debunked the myth that we get better at drinking games with alcohol. I just demolished everybody.
Yes.
But and even there was a moment where they rented a boat, and we were going on like the tube, and I said to Alyssa, like, I don't know if I should get on the boat because that's something that would be dangerous for you. And then there were moments of her wanting to live vicariously through me. She's like, no, get on the fucking tube. Like, I wish I could go on a tube right now. So, and that's been a lot of pushback that I've gotten from people online talking about sobriety during pregnancy, is like a lot of pregnant people want to live vicariously through their partner because they can't drink, because they can't have some amounts of fun. We almost went, when I was a teacher during that time, we almost went on a school field trip to Six Flags. I was like, I can't do the roller coasters, so I won't do that. She's like, no, I need you to go on the roller coasters because I can't. So I think, and coming back to like, I think what I learned out of that experience was I started doing some of the emotional labor and like checking myself. Oh, a roller coaster is dangerous for pregnant women. That is something she can't do. And that's not a thought that crosses a lot of our minds, I think, if we're not playing that game. It is a game. It's like, it's not necessary, but it's a game. And I think if you play it, you're going to have an improved level of awareness of what pregnant people are going through.
Yes.
as well as like, I think it's a great step into being a father and a equitable partner, is you start seeing things a little bit differently. So coming back to your question of like, when did you start seeing that you needed to change? I think that was a huge part of it, as well as paternity leave.
Mm.
I think there was a ton of invisible labor that Alyssa's always done for me and done for the house and for us. And I've pretty much, well, as a teacher, I was still having most like summers off for a bit. So I was still spending a lot of time, but I think when you're in the throes of those first 2-3 months of being a parent, seeing all the things that need to get done and there being no protection for your sleep. First, I feel
Mm.
like so many people are like, well, he's got to drive an hour and he's got to work in the morning. So I need to make sure he gets sleep. So I'll wake up with the baby. But there's no protection on my sleep. And it's like, no, you're an equal in this. We're in this together.
Mm.
Like I'm not, in fact, there were a lot of times that my first viral video really was, I really was crying. If I were to redo it again today, I wouldn't do it because I do feel like I sort of took advantage of having a baby almost as a prop in a video.
Mm.
But she was crying, and there was some music over it, the "You're Enough" song, and I just put in captions. I said, "The hard part of this moment is not her crying in my ear. That doesn't faze me that much. But knowing that Alyssa's committed to breastfeeding and that I have to go wake her up in the next 15 minutes if I don't calm her down, and I have to pull her in here because she's requested to be woken up, despite the
Mm.
fact that she's not slept for more than 90 minutes at a time for the past 2 weeks. That hurts way more. Thank you, moms, for the sacrifices you make."
Wow. Yeah. Hmm.
That when I started having all those eyeballs of women watching me and realizing how I was still falling short in their expectations and in what they're helping me to create, I think that was a huge opportunity for me to understand how much more I could be doing and how much better I could be doing. And like, I think I made we probably remember that Megan Stallion song, Hot Girl Shit. Is
Yeah.
I made like I'm doing hot boy shit. And so I was like, I was vacuuming and filling bottles and like doing the kitty litter. And Alyssa called me. She's like, are you just like looking like you're vacuuming for 2 seconds for the video to 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 be attractive to your now female audience? And
Mm-hmm.
getting called out on that was really probably important for me, and realizing
Oh
that
yeah.
I was doing a 50% or an 80% job on it to
Mm.
be on video for it, but not doing the whole work. So yeah, being sober, whether during pregnancy, paternity leave, those are huge opportunities for me to see where I was lacking in the mental load,
Mm.
emotional load game.
I just had so many interesting ahas. So you and I had chatted briefly before this, and I really want to give a shout out where shout out is due. So we've, heard you refer to Aimee and Ellie and the program and whatever. So I was recently at a um immersive experience, if you will, with a program called Desire on Fire, and it fucking rocked my world. I thought, as a therapist, I was like going into this like, oh, it'll be fine. I'll learn so many tools for my clients. It'll be so great. And like within 2 hours was like a puddle on the floor, and acknowledging my own shit was what it
Yeah.
was. It wasn't like a victim mentality as much of a like I'm creating an environment that is not conducive to the things that I know that I'm asking for. And I actually want to try and frame this question. It might be a little convoluted, we'll get there,
Mhm.
about radical ownership, because what we're hearing you display right now and model so beautifully is radical ownership for decisions or actions that have been made that at the time sounded and appeared altruistic but had an underlying tone of being ego fulfilling or selfishly driven. And it's really difficult to admit that because that's deeply vulnerable. And something I've wondered specifically after starting the Desire on Fire process, if you will, is as I watch women in your comment sections and the things that come up, I sometimes wonder if there is oh my gosh, Zach, you need to go and fix my husband. You need to go and tell him what he has to do and how he has to show up for me because he's failing me. But
How do I get this video on his For You page?
How do I get this on his For You page? With no radical ownership of the fact that we are not vulnerably expressing where that balloon is hitting the ground, where we are not vulnerably expressing that although we, and many of us women know this, want to claim that we are strong, independent women who don't need a man, who don't need people to help us. We've got this. There's so much pride in carrying the team. And we all bitch and complain about how tired we are in carrying the team, but then don't create a conducive environment for our partners to show up for us. And when they try to, we shut them down because it's not in the manner in which we want them to, without actually expressing why. And I wonder if instead of framing a question that you're used to, which is how can a feminine partner show up in a way that invites their partner to show up for them in the way they'd like them to, but where it's the partner's true vulnerable choice and self appearing.
I'm going to state your question back to you to make sure I'm getting it right.
Yeah.
I'm going to, just for heteronormative language,
Yeah.
how do women, moms, wives, girlfriends show up for their partners such that the men can have a conducive place for them to grow?
Yeah.
Close?
Perfect start.
I'm going to actually start with, so as I have my sessions with my clients, I write down content ideas all the time. And one I wrote down not more than an hour ago was, I think one thing that Alyssa got really good at. So for example, the reason she wasn't at that weekend with you is she had emergency last minute surgery on something. And the past 2 weeks have not been difficult for me to take over typical responsibilities that she has or that we share fairly 50-50. For example, our toddler waking up in the night. Typically that might be a little bit challenging for me, or I might feel a little bit resentful for her if she were laying next to me and I was like, we could be both doing this, but I'm going to do this for you. Eye roll, resentment added. What we've gotten good at, and I think she's gotten really good at, and I think a good amount of women listening might get, if they were to get better at this gives a better environment, is saying in a really empowered way what you want and or need. And her being able to say, she didn't actually say this around her surgery, but she said this around we've been really trying to grow her unicorn space, which is part of the fair play method, which is really taking on activities that you really desire, that fill your cup, that you feel inspired about, that similar to when I was describing mental load is the thing that keeps you up at night. It's the thing that you talk about at the party if you're not talking about your kids and your job.
Okay.
So for her, she's working on growing mushrooms. She's also working on, we have a barn in the back. We have 3 goats, taking care of them and working on having raised beds and crops for next year, and or hosting Thanksgiving. So those are some of the unicorn space items for her. In the past couple months since I've been working on, taking my content creation and becoming a coach due to the amount of requests for, hey, can you work with me and my partner? It's been hard for me to ask, and I promise I'll come back to the question. It's been hard for me to ask hey, I want to go, I have this idea that I want to go make a video about. And she's like, oh, okay. So you're leaving me with her. But if I say, so that's this, Wimpy, I kind of want this. This would be nice. But if I say, Alyssa, I need 25 minutes to go make a video in the other room and then I'll be back. Okay, cool. Go do it. The difference between the empowerment of what I'm asking for and what I'm requesting versus this would be nice, and I want you to also give me the permission to go do that thing, rather than us saying I need this for me. is huge. So I think, coming back to your question, what I think Alyssa's gotten really good at is around her unicorn space. I need the next 5 hours to work on this, or hey, tomorrow I want to take about 5 hours to work on, some of the processes for my mushroom growing. And I can come back and say, I would love to give that to you. And either after you're done, can we switch? And I would like to work on my book and or work on my content creation, or Sunday, I get something similar. Does that work for you? When we're having this much more equal shift in responsibility, rather than her like nickel and diming, like starting the day where she just starts working on it and she's like, oh, this shouldn't take too long. I'll just work on it here and there. And then me be annoyed every time she steps away and like I'm managing something that I had the expectation we are going to do together, like say just being with our kid. That sucks because it's a broken expectation. But when we're creating that upfront expectation for what we need, I think it opens us up, one, to have permission to do it ourselves, but two, gives the other person permission to do it themselves. And the way I was talking about like content creation, like the only reason I've been able to start having a coaching practice is because we both started being empowered around our unicorn space and what we wanted.
Yes. You did something there that I was so hyper aware of while I was at the Desire on Fire experience, and something that I actually have talked about in like literally, I think, almost every session I've had with a client since coming home. You use the word and not the word but. So yes, I want to give you those 5 hours that you're asking for to go work on growing your mushrooms. And I am hoping to get some time to go and work on my content creation, et cetera, et cetera. And what's so interesting about just changing a 3-letter word for another 3-letter word is that one sounds like only one of us gets to fulfill our needs and one of us has to sacrifice our needs for the other person to be happy, versus we both have the right to have our needs fulfilled. And as a collective, how are we going to make sure those needs are met? The most simple of change with like a drastic tone flip. Do you catch yourself doing that and correct it in the moment ever to go, no, wait, like there's a better way of saying this?
That is one of the exercises we did back in 2013 when I took one of those landmark courses. The weekend that I met Ellie and Alyssa, was, I think the example they gave was something like, how would you, they're like, okay, take the biggest thing you want in your life and then like say what is stopping you, and phrase it like, I want this but that. And then they had us say it out loud. And then they said, okay, now imagine this sentence: I want to go to the beach but my shoes are brown. Why does that sound strange? And it's because we were like, well, what do brown shoes have anything to do with going to the beach? That those two don't seem to equate at all. They don't have any relationship. So it's the but that's creating the relationship between those two things. And so I self-published a book back in 2016, and I said, stop. I forget what the name of the chapter is. Either way, stop sitting your butt on yourself. You're creating this problem that doesn't need to exist. And so like, I've been practicing it probably for about 10 years, and but is not typically a part of my language anymore. So I've gotten really good at it. Probably took maybe 6 months to a year to really get it out of my vocabulary. I'd be hard pressed to remember the last time I used the word but as just like a general part of talking.
Totally. It's crazy since noticing it that I've been trying to be like hyper vigilant about how often it comes out of my mouth, and watching how quickly I'm like, oh, this is uncomfortable now. Like, ooh, it's uncomfortable, which I think is actually such an interesting reflection of this work, or literally any sort of self-development work, is if it feels cringy, you're doing it right. Good.
Yeah.
It's good. Yeah. If you're not cringing at least a little bit every day at something that you're doing, or uncomfortable a little bit every day with something that you're doing, you're probably not growing. And so learning to love that, like, oh no, that was not it. Like, it's an addicting feeling when you
Yeah.
get used to it. And I actually think that somehow getting used to that feeling is when we become radically accountable to our own actions, because you crave the cringeworthy moment of
Yeah.
realizing, wow, I just did something that was so out of alignment with what I value or what I'm trying to implement in my life. I wonder, you know, and this, I feel like this topic could be such a whole podcast episode in and of itself. So I'm going to acknowledge this. But when I think about all of this, and I think about how one of the number one things that comes up when we do any sort of couples therapy is we are struggling with intimacy and sex. And we spend a lot of time talking about sex, but not the underlying reasons why there are issues with intimacy and sex. I wonder if you have any insights in the work that you've done over the last decade around how these two topics are connected.
Yeah. And if anyone wants to hear the longer version of this, when I was about probably a year and a half ago, this is what we talked about on Aimee and Ellie's podcast.
Oh, we got to find it. We'll link it. I'll link it into ours so that people can go find it too.
It was you'll hear a less fleshed out, more raw version of this conversation. I've gotten a little bit more comfortable with talking about it now. It's still a bit raw, but like it's still vulnerable, but I've said it enough times that it makes more sense.
Fair enough.
So your question again was, in a lot of therapeutic settings, sex gets talked a lot about, intimacy gets talked a lot about.
Mm-hmm.
What a lot of people to conflate is the two, is that there is a difference, and a lot of people think that sex is intimacy, but they don't realize that there's plenty of intimacy without sex.
Yes.
I'm going to go to a video that I made on my subscribers only, so this is exclusive, if you will. On our anniversary a couple weeks ago, Alyssa was still in recovery, not ready to be physically intimate, and I still really wanted some sort of physical interaction with her. And one of the things we've been working on, probably about 2 years while when she was pregnant, I think is when we started this, was I brought up this concept of me self-pleasuring next to her with the intention of feeling vulnerable in her presence, and feeling intimate with her and feeling connected with her without her really having to do any kind of participation in it. And I've realized how much value there is in feeling vulnerable in her presence and being able to, like, self-pleasuring is, like, for me, is a scary experience because I've grown up with a lot of shame around it. From getting caught watching porn on my parents' computer and my mom flipping out, to getting walked in on by a roommate in college, and being made out to be this disgusting act that we do, which we all do behind closed doors. So with that shame, it's really vulnerable for me to do that. And what we've been working on for the past 2 years is taking the shame out of that experience for me and having it be a part of my bodily autonomy, being a part of, maybe not a need, but like sometimes a desire. And so what the conversation I had with her, again, I think the goal of this is to sort of show an example of how to distill the difference between the two, or to differentiate.
Yeah.
Is I uncomfortably said, I recognize that you can't / probably wouldn't be right for you to be physical right now, given your bodily status. I would really like to still do something next to you. And I said, so oftentimes, like, to sort of turn myself on, I'll touch her, or I'll ask, like, hey, do you mind if I touch you to turn myself on? Which, when a lot of times when she's not necessarily in the mood for it, ends up being a huge turn on for her, that she's turned on by the fact that I get turned on touching her. not even
Mm-hmm.
necessarily in like not private parts, just like all over.
Touching.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so I ended up asking her, can we hold hands while I do it?
Mm.
And at the end of it, I climaxed, and um, I said thank you. And she's
Mm.
like, for what? I was like, well, you just provided a really wonderful, vulnerable space that I felt connected to, where I could be physical, and at the same time I didn't feel judged for it. And I felt really like a partnership.
Mm.
And when she had originally like pushed back, she was like, but I can't join. That sucks for
Mm.
me. I was like, okay, is this a reasonable request? And I said, if I were injured, let's say, I couldn't do that for myself, but she were feeling like she wanted to be intimate, how would I feel about her requesting to do the same, or for me to like pleasure her, go down on her or something,
Right.
and receive nothing in my general area, right?
Right.
And I decided like, yeah, I would totally do that.
Mm.
Um, and that was why I pushed back and made the ask, like I would actually really like to do this. And the only reason I'm okay with asking for it is because I know I would do the same for you. I have a
Mm.
hard time imagining you actually asking for that, and I know that I would do that for you, certainly. Um, so I think that was a good experience of,
Yeah.
I could see me 5 years prior, might have been like, hey, like I know that you're like not in the mood. Maybe like could we have like a rain check to have like sex in a week or something? And feeling like if we weren't able to have intercourse or be physical with each other, that there was something wrong with that, and that there was no intimacy that could be gained from any other experience.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that would be the example of, I think we can be physical with ourselves. There are ways to have intimacy. We've gotten really good at, I think from a lot of the Desire and Fire teachings, is like really asking for what we want. We've tried out some new things. When we try some positions, I've said, I actually want you to just tease the fuck out of me. Like
Mm.
don't actually put anything in your mouth.
Right.
I want to feel like you're hairbrushing against it.
Mm-hmm.
And super turn on for me. So I think we've gotten much better at taking the shame out of those conversations that I think we learned in adolescence.
Yes.
So did I answer your question?
You did actually. And it's interesting because, like, this whole topic, sex, intimacy, I find that even when I have individuals or couples that we have these conversations with, it takes a long time for people to get past the shame of even talking about
Yeah.
things that we all know are normal and that we all do. Like, I can be like, let's talk about masturbation. People are like, oh my God. And I'm like, just say it.
Yeah.
Just say the word. Like,
Yeah.
let's talk about it, because the opposite of vulnerability is shame. And in all of these contexts, we're talking about vulnerability as the key to actually feeling like a partnership.
Mm-hmm.
And sex has such a deep shame attached to it that it only can improve with deep vulnerability, and vulnerability to say the hard thing, to say, I would so love to be able to self pleasure beside you, knowing full well that this is not something that you are able to offer. And I want to leave room to make sure that you are okay with this. And is there anything else that I need to be aware of? Like, and in the regular context of our world, that conversation is so taboo. Like, people would hear that conversation and be like, what the fuck? But
Yeah.
if you look at the root of the what the fuck, it's because it's a taboo, shame-based conversation that absolutely does not warrant shame.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can get to the vulnerable side of this and have the conversation, the connection that comes with that, the intimacy that comes with that, that is so non-physical, is groundbreaking. And, I was thinking about this in the context of even your own coined term, recovering man-child,
Mm-hmm.
because actually my cousin who brought me into the Desire on Fire world, and I will forever be grateful for this. When we were talking about mental load and feeling like you have to do everything all the time, what she said to me was, if your partner feels like your child, we are hardwired to not want to have sex with our children.
Mm.
Yeah,
Understandable.
fair. Right? So like, okay, so how do we work on feeling like we have a partner? Because that's the intimacy, that's the sexual side of this. And I think just learning to have these conversations in a way that are just normalizing the things that we all do as humans that are vulnerable and a little bit messy is actually where the magic is. It's not in the actual act itself, it's in everything else leading up to it. So I just want to thank you for normalizing conversations that are so perceived to be abnormal, because they shouldn't be at all.
Hey, it's still a very vulnerable topic. There's a reason that we're 45 minutes into this podcast that I allowed that to get brought up, only for the people that are really here to stand with the conversation.
They gotta want to be here.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right. I want to give you a chance to talk a little bit about where you're at now, because you offer coaching for people who are in a place where they're ready to really get into it. And so do you mind sharing a bit about what it is that you are doing now and what that looks like for other people?
Yeah, absolutely. So I offer a free consultation call. I can send you a link to put in the notes.
Yeah, let's do it.
What I typically do is it's pretty much a free coaching session. The main thing that I think I'm best at is working directly with men that are working to lean in. Maybe most men that have found me have been referred by their partners or sisters or mothers saying, hey, you do this to me, watch his videos. And or, hey, like, you know how we've talked about divorce and separation the past 6 months? You should probably go book a consult with this guy. What I usually do is I'm working with them, and I do also work with couples, but mostly men. And we read through Fair Play. We understand what the mental load is. They're consistently coming back every week trying to better understand what the mental load looks like for their partner and how to have better conversations around that. Some common themes I'm helping guys with is trying to decrease the amount of defensiveness that they're coming to in their conversations. Hey, I told you to take the trash out the other day and it's still sitting there. Well, babe, like we work on decreasing that defensiveness and being able to receive that from our partner. We work on having consistent, reoccurring conversations to proactively deal with tough conversations that are coming. For example, yesterday morning, Alyssa woke up and was generally pissed. Why in that moment? I had no idea. We ended up getting to it about 25 minutes later after no shouting, but some very passive aggressive comments to each other. And it was that she was mad that 2 weeks ago, we had talked about going to bed earlier so that we could touch base before the end of the day. I've been spending more time working on growing my clients and business and having these consultation calls. And we hadn't touched base in a couple of days. We had gotten a message from daycare saying, hey, this was to everyone, not just us. Like, hey, make sure you're putting the appropriate clothes on your children. It's getting colder out. I'm just giving you a heads up. One or two people had to be pointed out to. And she was petrified of that being us because she knows that she has a different level of detail in looking at what is being put on our toddler's body than I do in the morning. And I jumped up out of the bed to hopefully allow Alyssa to keep sleeping because she's still somewhat recovering. And her first thought was, I'm about to be put through shame today because he's going to put the wrong clothes on her. And so what we ended up doing for about 25, 30, 40 minutes that morning was we pulled our phones out and identified what she should be wearing for different levels of temperature if we look at the forecast for the day. Which sounds like a stupid conversation for two adults to be having. I think that's like the culture out there is like, you should know that you're an adult. And for us to have structured conversations and to go over those expectations is one, super valuable so we can hold each other to it. But also, if we treat it as an iterative process and say, hey, this is the guidelines we're going to use for a week or two, let's come back in 2 weeks and make adjustments to this. There's so much less resentment being built in those moments of failure or moments of like not following through on that, because we know there's a next conversation happening.
Yes.
So coming back to it, I work with a lot of couples and guys to be owning those conversations, saying, hey, Sunday, we're going to talk about some of the expectations for dishes, for vacuuming, for cleaning, for the things that he's probably already doing 50 to 90% of, but it's still on her mind because they haven't built the trust yet. And so he's, one, owning it, and two, he's working on having those conversations, having them be low level emotions so they're not yelling at each other. And he's asking for permission to fail. He's doing exactly what I did a year ago, which was I said to Alyssa, I want to start, I've been doing 80% of dishes. I hate it when it comes 7:00 and we have to go to bed an hour or two. And I'm walking to the kitchen to do it. And you say, hey, honey, can you do the dishes? I'm like, fuck you. Like, I was just going to do them. Now I don't even feel like I can take ownership over the fact that I was just about to do it. And now it feels like I'm doing your bidding and I'm pissed about it. And I don't even want to do the dishes now. And so when guys are having those conversations, they're owning them and they're asking, can you back off for 2 weeks and trust me to do this? And in 2 weeks, we'll talk about where I've failed. When I said that to her, pretty close to it, she was like, I made a list, like I think there were 15, 17 things on it of what it looks like to put our kitchen to sleep. And she's like, there's no way you're going to do that. From what I've seen in the past 5 years living with you, there's no chance. We're going to come back and it's going to be all on me because you suck at this. And after 2 weeks, we came back and I was like, so how have I been doing? And then she had an epiphany like, wow, I've actually not thought about it. You've taken it off I don't think she used these words, but like, you've taken off my mental load. And it was because I knew what I was responsible for. I was chipping away at it throughout the day. And things were not adding up because there was no question at the end of the day who had ownership over it. It was just mine. And so when we're able to take full ownership of it, it's surprisingly freeing for a lot of guys. Don't realize the freedom in owning something fully because we're not being nagged because we know it's ours. And
it's such a good topic. It goes back to, when we were talking about the radical accountability of like, not just saying you need to do this, but leaving space for it to be done in a way that's like genuinely authentic and makes us feel seen. And I will say, like, part of what has been such like an epiphany in this area is my husband is like phenomenal. I have a phenomenal husband. And I think I do a really good job of setting the stage for him to show up for me. And I also realize that I'm a massive control freak and I like things done a certain way. And so I will say, can you vacuum? But then also say, and do it with this and this and this in this time, this way. And it's no longer a service to me. He is being nagged. And trying to leave room for him to show up in the way that's most authentic to him, to prove to myself that he's capable of doing these things without me feeling like I have to like set the stage for that, is disgustingly empowering. And I've been testing this just a little bit with the tiniest things where, even sending a message and I'll be like, don't direct, just say how I feel, say what I feel like I'm needing, and then leave it. And let's just see how he shows up. Not in testing him, but like, I want to learn to trust his ability to just show up.
Yeah.
And I would say like 10 for 10, he shows up without me having to nag and without him feeling like I'm nagging and without us having to backtrack how we got here and what we could have done differently, just simply expressing a need with absolutely no direction on how that need is supposed to be met. Just what it is. That's it. And I think that the coaching that you are offering is so empowering for men to be able to say that in a way that's not like, you're nagging me, but like, I don't feel like I'm being given the space to show up for you in the way I want to show up for you, because I feel like I'm just responding to a request versus just doing out of what feels right for me. And as a partner hearing that has to be the most fulfilling sentiment in the entire world. So I so love and stand for the work that you're doing. I absolutely also see this in conjunction with this does not mean that we get to pass the buck and be like, yeah, men, figure this shit out and come back and be a better partner. Like, no, 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 no. If we want the work to be done, we also have to do the work in acknowledging what we are doing to either stand up for or stand in the way of the type of relationships that we are asking for. And that takes a lot of dual responsibility.
Yeah.
This is such a fun topic. I feel like I could talk about it for literally ever.
How have I been doing on delivering the hype that you built up in the beginning, saying you thought this was going to be one of your better episodes?
I think that it will very much match said things. I do. And I very much believe that this is such an ongoing topic. We would love to have you back. I would love to keep poking at questions and learning this from both sides of things. I really think that the dual accountability of this is like that is where the magic happens. And I just am so grateful to see that our world in general is moving in a direction where it's not so much like a victim mentality of like, this is what life's delivering to me and it's unfair, but like, this is what's happening in my life. And I want to figure out how to take responsibility in changing that direction. And as a therapist, I can't think of anything more fulfilling, but realistically, and what knocked me on my ass this weekend is it's not about being a therapist, it's about being a fucking human and just realizing the impact that this has on being just a person, despite where and what that is. So thank you. Thank you for taking the time, for the work that you're doing, and for encouraging other people to also take a look in the mirror and have those hard conversations.
Thank you.
Okay.
And I would say if people are interested in working with me, fill out a relationship goals consult. There's a couple questions. I am taking on new clients. And if you want the free content, just follow me on, I would recommend Instagram first, Real Zach Think Share, and TikTok, Zach Think Share.
Perfect. And I will tag this all in the comment section so that everyone can just click and find very easily.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Thank you, Allegra, for having me.
Yeah.